Imagine stepping into the aftermath of a massive civilization-level event. You are walking through this apocalyptic wasteland.
You're pretty heavy image right from the start.
Yeah, right. And on your left, there are these massive, impenetrable stone fortresses, like structures engineered to withstand absolutely anything, but they've been reduced to pulverized dust.
Just completely gone.
Completely gone. But right next door, sitting totally untouched in the middle of all this debris, is this fragile-looking, unassuming storm shelter. I mean, it makes zero logical sense.
Well, it defies what we think of as strong. Right.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We have a genuinely fascinating stack of sources in front of us today, including historical commentaries, some essays on the physiological mechanics of human fear, and at the center of it all, the raw ancient text of Isaiah chapter 25.
Which is such a vivid piece of text.
It really is. Our mission today is to pull apart this ancient blueprint, to understand how it provides, well, a really practical masterclass on finding the ultimate shelter when life's pressures hit critical mass.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you have ever felt overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of the world right now, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah, because we are looking at a text that basically operates as the ultimate diagnostic test for human stability. It is this profound exploration of what actually remains standing after instability is mercilessly exposed by the elements. It forces us to ask, why does the seemingly indestructible fortress shatter while the simple shelter holds perfectly?
Right, and before we can understand how to build that kind of shelter today, we really have to look at the striking contrast this ancient text presents. Because Isaiah 25, it doesn't pull any punches. The imagery is just incredibly visceral.
Oh, absolutely. It's violent almost. Yeah, exactly. The text describes God taking a defensed city, which in the ancient Near East wasn't just like a military outpost. It was the absolute pinnacle of human engineering and economic security. And it turns it into a ruin and a heap. It says the palace of strangers will be no city, never to be built again.
And we really have to recognize what a defensed city meant to the original audience listening to this.
Yeah, what was the context there?
Well, in antiquity, high walls were the primary technology for survival. I mean, if you had thick enough walls, you controlled the trade, you controlled agriculture, you basically controlled your destiny.
Right, it was your ultimate guarantee.
Exactly.
Right.
And the text explicitly mentions the fortress of the high fort of thy walls being brought down to the very dust. So it's this total irreversible dismantling of everything society considered to be an impenetrable guarantee of safety.
Oh, wow. And the brutality of that imagery really peaks when the text brings up Moab.
Right, the dunghill imagery.
Yes. It says, Moab shall be trodden down under God, even as straw is trodden down for the dunghill. And for anyone who, isn't totally up to speed on ancient geopolitics.
Which is probably most of us.
Right. Moab was a neighboring region, and they were really known for their geographic isolation and honestly, their extreme arrogance. They relied heavily on their elevated mountainous terrain to keep them safe.
They thought they were untouchable.
Exactly. So being trodden down like straw in a dunghill is the ultimate humiliation of self-sufficient pride. It's essentially saying your geographic advantage is garbage.
What's fascinating here is that the text pairs that catastrophic collapse of the arrogant with this totally shocking alternative. While the defense city is reduced to dust, the text states that God becomes a strength to the poor, a strength to the needy in his distress, a refuge from the storm, and a shadow from the heat. The contrast is absolute. The fortress fails, but the unseen refuge holds.
And the text actually adds a very specific condition there, right? This refuge holds when the blast of the terrible ones is as a storm against the wall. So the storm is still actively raging.
Right, the danger hasn't passed.
Exactly. The heat is still blazing, the environment remains entirely hostile, yet there is this shelter that holds perfectly in the middle of it. It honestly makes me think about modern construction.
How so?
Well, like if you walk into a newly built house, you can knock on a beautiful, perfectly painted interior wall, and it sounds solid. It looks structural.
But it's not.
Right, it's actually a non-load-bearing wall. It's just drywall and thin studs holding up nothing but paint and maybe a few picture frames. The moment the roof takes on a massive snow load, that wall completely buckles because it was never engineered to carry the weight. It only looked the part.
That is the exact mechanism Isaiah is exposing. The defense city was essentially a non-load-bearing wall. It relied entirely on its intimidating appearance and its sheer mass. But surface-level strength always fails because it lacks a foundation anchored into reality. Foundational strength holds because it's designed to distribute the pressure of the storm down into bedrock.
That makes so much sense. The text doesn't stop at just surviving the storm, though. It moves from survival into this lavish, almost overwhelming scene of victory.
The feast.
Yes, it says God is going to make a feast of fat things for all people, a feast of wines on the lees, full of marrow, well refined. Now, for anyone who isn't an ancient vintner, wines on the lees is a brilliant technical metaphor.
It really is. It shows a deep understanding of the process.
Right, because the lees are the dead yeast cells left over from fermentation. And leaving wine to age on the lees sounds totally counterintuitive, but it's this meticulous process that prevents oxidation and creates the richest, most complex texture and flavor.
But it takes time.
Exactly. It requires an immense amount of time and waiting.
And that aging process is the perfect parallel for what this chapter is communicating. The storm forces a period of waiting, of sitting in the dark, much like that wine aging in the barrel.
Wow, yeah.
But the result is unparalleled richness. And the text follows this feast imagery with massive sweeping promises. It says God will destroy the face of the covering cast over all people and the veil that is spread over all nations.
And then it hits that ultimate theological climax.
Right, swallowing up death.
Yes, he will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from off all faces. Swallowing up death in victory and wiping away tears, that is a massive paradigm shift from the opening lines where everything was turning into a dunghill.
It's a complete 180.
It maps out a complete transition, right?
Right.
From the violent collapse of false premises to the unshakable protection of the true foundation, leading finally to profound joy. We have the ruined fortress, the unshakable shelter, and then the victory feast.
And bridging that ancient map to our current reality requires us to look at what happens after instability hits. Because the text is entirely focused on the architecture of stability. In our modern lives, those high ancient walls look like ego, the illusion of control and just relentless self-promotion. The hard truth the text teaches is that things built on illusion always eventually fail.
So taking this into our practical day-to-day lives, the core principle is really about the danger of prioritizing appearance over structure. When we focus on internal stability instead of external optics, the mechanics of how we experience a crisis completely change.
How about the impact changes?
Yeah, the strength of your foundation doesn't eliminate the risk of a storm, but it drastically reduces the internal impact. The blast hits the wall, but the wall transfers the load safely.
But the problem is that we spend our time decorating the upper floors of our lives while completely ignoring a crumbling foundation in the basement.
Oh, absolutely.
We construct our own load-bearing walls out of career titles or bank accounts or social standing, and we just assume that because society respects those things, they will keep the roof from caving in.
I mean, I know I am completely guilty of this, but wait, we live in a world that explicitly rewards building impressive, defensed cities. Like careers, reputations, social media profiles. I will spend 3 hours tweaking my LinkedIn profile to look like an impenetrable fortress of career success.
Well, we all do it.
Right. Carefully curating every achievement, completely ignoring the fact that behind the screen, I might be entirely burnt out and running on fumes. So are we saying all of that is completely fragile if there's a hidden crack in the foundation?
Yes, because it works beautifully right up until the moment it doesn't.
Wow.
And that is the illusion the text is warning us against. Weak foundations always get exposed. When the blast of the terrible ones comes, whether that is a sudden economic downturn, a health crisis, or a profound personal failure, optics cannot save you.
A polished LinkedIn profile doesn't keep you from drowning.
Exactly. The storm does the auditing, the facade gets blown away, and the substance is the only thing that actually keeps you alive.
The storm strips away the PR, which actually brings up the psychological side of this text. Specifically that line about God destroying the veil that is spread over all nations. Because surviving a crisis isn't just a physical or financial event, right? It profoundly rewires your brain.
It really does. The removal of the veil is a fascinating psychological phenomenon. In modern terms, the veil is the fog of denial we live in. We convince ourselves our false strength is real.
We buy our own hype.
We totally do.
Yeah.
But a crisis violently strips that away. When you are in the middle of a literal or metaphorical hurricane, your brain shifts. The prefrontal cortex, which handles all our complex social planning and concerns about what the neighbors think,
Right.
that gets overridden by the brainstem and the amygdala, which handle raw survival.
You suddenly don't care about the aesthetic of your lawn when the kitchen is literally on fire.
Precisely. That biological shift to survival mode forces us to finally see our foundation for what it really is. The veil is lifted, The disruption cuts through the fog, and suddenly your actual structural integrity makes complete sense.
And once that veil is gone, you can finally see the board clearly. The text also talks about bringing down the noise of strangers and the branch of the terrible ones. That deafening noise represents those overwhelming problems that seem so massive and permanent in the moment.
But they are permanent.
Exactly. The text promises that noise gets brought down like the heat in a dry place being cooled by the shadow of a cloud.
It's an application of maintaining perspective. The intensity of a crisis naturally fades over time. We tend to catastrophize when the storm first hits. We assume that because things are shattered now, they will be shattered permanently.
Which ties directly back into that beautiful imagery of swallowing up death and wiping away tears. Loss is not the final chapter. Hardships do not dictate the ultimate outcome. Genuine recovery is a mechanical reality of this blueprint.
The promise of the feast and the wiping away of tears serves as a guarantee that the difficult seasons don't have the final word. And when you really internalize that, it changes how you process loss in real time.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you synthesize all these mechanics, knowing the noise will eventually fade, knowing the veil of cognitive dissonance will be lifted, knowing that recovery is possible, it entirely alters your physiological and emotional relationship with fear.
Yes.
You don't magically eliminate fear because fear is a natural biological response to danger.
Right. You need fear to survive.
Exactly. But you outgrow it. You outgrow fear by building a stronger structural foundation beneath you. Fear just loses its grip when your internal structure is aligned with bedrock truth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this explains why intentional rebuilding after a disruption is so critical. When a storm exposes a weak, non-load-bearing wall in our lives, the immediate human temptation is to panic and quickly rebuild the exact same ego-driven defenses.
Just hoping they hold up better the next time.
Right. We just slap a fresh coat of paint over the crack and pretend the foundation didn't just shift.
Yeah, we totally do.
And it sets us up for an even more catastrophic failure later. But the removal of the veil gives us the harsh clarity to say, that was false strength. That didn't work. We have to use the clarity provided by the storm to make structurally sound decisions moving forward. You use the experience of the collapse to construct a life that is actually grounded. That way, when the next pressure inevitably arrives, you are operating from a place of quiet confidence rather than blind terror.
So we have explored the architecture of stability and the neurological mechanisms of outgrowing fear. But Isaiah 25 isn't just an ancient self-help manual about psychological resilience. It is a profoundly theological text. It points to a very specific, solitary source for this stability.
It does. The entire chapter builds to a massive theological climax in verse 9. The realization is profound. It says, "And it shall be said in that day, Lo, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We have waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation."
Notice the repetition of the phrase, "we have waited for him." That implies a serious history.
A lot of time has passed.
Right. It implies that these people have been sitting in the dark barrel like the wine on the lees. They have been through the storm, they held onto the foundation, and now they are experiencing the promised result.
Because confidence is generated by recognition. We build confidence intentionally, by remembering what has held our weight in the past and trusting what has already proven it works. When the storm strips away the false strength of our ego and our bank accounts and our titles, we are left with the stark, undeniable realization that God is the only reliable foundation that actually survives the blast.
So what does this all mean? If I am listening to this right now and I am actively going through a massive storm, maybe I'm staring at a pile of rubble where my career or my relationship or my plans used to be, how does knowing that pride gets removed and loss isn't permanent practically transform my day-to-day relationship with God?
It's a great question.
How do we move this from a brilliant theological concept into actual relational intimacy?
This raises an important question about the actual mechanics of waiting on God. When the text says, "we have waited for him," that waiting is not a passive, helpless resignation.
Okay.
It's not sitting around doing nothing while the roof caves in. It is an active reliance on a proven foundation. It is the deliberate daily choice to stand in the storm shelter rather than running outside to build your own flimsy umbrella out of pride.
Active reliance. I love that. It really rewires the way we view surrender.
It does. Because when you stop relying on your own fragile high walls, your manic efforts to control everyone around you, your obsession with PR and optics, and instead actively trust his shelter, a profound physiological and spiritual shift occurs.
Wow.
First, your daily anxiety decreases because you are no longer carrying the impossible neurological weight of being your own savior.
Yeah.
And second, your relational intimacy with God deepens exponentially. You begin to recognize him not merely as a theological idea you read about, but as your literal functional refuge.
You finally outgrow the fear because you realize you aren't the one holding the universe together. You are standing on the rock. It is incredibly powerful to realize that the very storm that strips away our precious curated false strength is the exact mechanism that forces us into a deeper, more secure relationship with the only foundation that actually lasts.
Exactly.
We have covered some profound territory today. We moved from the terrifying, apocalyptic collapse of prideful, heavily fortified cities to the beautiful, complex feast of victory.
And the through line connecting all of it is crystal clear. True stability is a matter of architectural integrity. Real strength outlasts false strength every single time, no matter how loud the storm gets.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want you to mentally revisit that opening image we started with, the pulverized fortress and the untouched shelter. I want you to reflect on the high fortresses currently standing in your own life, the non-load-bearing walls you rely on for security, for status, for your peace of mind. Are those walls anchored into the solid truth of God's shelter? Or are they built on the incredibly fragile illusions of pride, ego, and optics? What happens if the storm hits those walls tomorrow?
Answering that question honestly, without the veil of denial, is the necessary first step toward building something that can weather any blast.
We want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. The storm doesn't just destroy, it clears the ground for a better foundation. How will you apply this information in your life?
Thanks for joining us to unpack all of this today. Take care.
Until next time, keep building on what lasts.